It's interesting now to have a look at how we deal as a country when we have an emergency. And we have two speakers today from ANSTO, Bronte Sile and Rhiarn Hoban. Bronte's a consultant health physicist within ANSTO's radiation services team with a wealth of experience in the field of radiation detection and protection. And then we have Rhiarn Hoban, who's a work health and safety advisor with ANSTO's high reliability team, bringing a wealth of her experience in the field of biological sciences and safety to support safe development and delivery of research and radiopharmaceuticals. So it's pretty amazing. We all would have been glued to the media when this capsule went missing. So let's hear from some of the experts that were involved in finding it. So this talks about the drive behind ANSTO's CORIS360 technology to find a lost radioactive capsule. Thank you.
Thank you, and apologies. My sister Bronte is actually sick today, so you're going to have to get stuck with the one person with zero radiation or nuclear background. But as we've already seen, safety is pretty embedded in your system, so I'm sure you'll enjoy it regardless. So, as it was kindly mentioned, the lost source. This made international headlines, and it was something that took the world by surprise. As we are aware, this was an 8mm by 6mm radioactive capsule that was lost somewhere along only 1,400 kilometres, just a small stretch, and we were called upon just to see maybe we could find it. It was dubbed the needle in the haystack. As you're aware, probably, it was quite a significant source, so for those familiar, it was a bit more of a beacon, but navigating this landscape really did make it a Hercules sort of scenario. So how did we go about this? The request for support actually came through NEMA. So the Department of Fire Emergency Service, the government of Western Australia, led this event. This led for calls for support directly through ARPANSA, Department of Defence, and then finally through us. As you can see from that timeline, we can see that January 12th, so very early into the new year, the package left the site in Newman. At some point on the 16th, it arrived in Perth, sat for about a week when they opened up and went, oh dear, we're kind of missing something significant inside this box. This led to an immediate call for support from the WA authorities, which is excellent response from them, and that in turn led them to quickly respond, search their immediate public areas with the resources they had, but the realisation, the distance that it had travelled and the reality that it could be anywhere along there, they needed additional support. This led to a 48-hour window for us to test, confirm and prepare for deployment. One of the key aspects of that, which we really seized upon, was modifying our CORIS360 technology to be something that we could use in a setting we hadn't previously trialled. If you're familiar with the CORIS, we're very proud of it. It was designed at ANSTO. It can actually map and give you heat maps of the radioactivity in the vicinity. Don't quote me too hard on this, I am only safety, not radiation. But it's incredibly useful. But what is the big drive behind this technology is the people that created it. They were able to rapidly modify this and get this into a moving vehicle. So, just for a bit of fun and giggles, this is the crew that we sent out, all nice and jet-lagged within 48 hours, and a literal station wagon of equipment. It was a very fast rollout, and we're all looking a little worse for wear after a 5-hour delay. But we got there. So how does this look entering a national, essentially emergency where we called upon? We broke this up into reporting with ourselves locally, our interoperability, and how the agencies work together. For us, ANSTO established its own incident controller. This was essential because despite the fact it was not our event, we needed to protect our own people and manage what resources were needed for us to be able to send there. In total, we only sent 7 of us and a fleetwood of equipment. But what do we do with that? How do we use that? What's happening back in base? It was vital for us to have that controller to manage it. On site with us, we had Prashant Maharaj. He was our team leader. He is also our emergency manager for radiation on site. So he led the team, guided us with how we would approach this and how we would integrate into this system. And that established our mobile unit leaders. They each took charge of their own individual equipment and obviously the people that they were working with. This enabled us to seamlessly interoperate with what was already a very active emergency situation that had been going for a couple of days now. That's where I sort of came in handy. I became the safety liaison, and I was embedded in the EOC so I could look after our ANSTO employees and they could focus on their operational due diligence. And that information made a nice little sort of connection, a point of truth. So no one person was overwhelmed with too much responsibility. In addition, we've all been provided training with AINSE. If you're not familiar with AINSE, it's the Australasian Inter-Services Incident Management System, and it's the basis for most of Australia's emergency systems. It gives us a structure so we all can operate and again have a point of truth and logistically manage an emerging event. Another key aspect of ANSTO is we offer our own radiation nuclear emergency preparedness training. And funnily enough, a lost source is one of the exercises we make you practice. So we were very keen to be on board for this because it's like, oh, all that practice about to pay off. In terms of agencies we're working with, so our regulator was the Radiation Council under the Department of Health, I believe, and they were sort of inviting us there to sort of support this. Incident controller was DFES, the Department of Fire Emergency Services, and as a result, the other agencies were ARPANSA, who were invaluable, Defence, and also police, because at this point we didn't know if this was criminal or not, so we had to proceed. So for those not familiar, this is a very basic rundown of what AIMS looks like. We've got our incident controller, and under him he has coordinations for operations, planning, intelligence, logistics, finance, and public information investigation. Normally, when you call ANSTO, it's like, I just want a bit of advice. We normally sit in that intelligence, maybe investigation, but this time we were invited because we could act as operational subject matter experts. We don't only have the brains, we have the brawn to put us in the field and we can do it effectively. So what does that look like? Like this. We have our ANSTO team lead who reports directly into our operations manager. Then we have our ANSTO field units. This consisted of Team Bravo, Charlie, and Delta. Also, it's so hard to say Team Bravo when the first one's called Team Alpha and you want to say Beta. And this was similar for the other organisations such as ARPANSA and Defence. As part of this as well, we all had embedded our own safety liaisons so that we could sit there and support our team leaders and our various field units going through. So there was always someone embedded representing their respective organisations in that EOC. In addition, my role was also to facilitate that team leader with communications back on site. So ANSTO was always aware of what we needed, what needed to be done, while we were essentially the opposite side of the country. Also, there is nothing worse than that 4-hour time distance. You will not ever acclimatise. But safety, that's probably the biggest thing we had for our workers. The radiation source was definitely a hazard. It was a significant one, but it was by no means our most significant risk. We were faced with the challenge of isolation. Team Bravo was being sent directly out to Newman. We had extreme heat, it was at the peak of summer. Road trains, I'm not sure if anyone's really familiar with them, but they are massive, fast-moving trucks. They're supposed to go 100 kilometres an hour. I challenge that occasionally. And fatigue, these are massive distances. And something that I haven't listed here was the general public. We mobilised 2 of our units to be in Perth. They provided reassurance to the public because until we found this source, there was always going to be apprehension, and it was important to maintain that security and safety for them, even though we highly did not suspect that source to be anywhere near there. And as part of that, we controlled it with satellite phones. We had check-ins, we had debriefs, we had tracking. Anyone with an iPhone, be aware, you can really track. Scheduling. DFES went above and beyond for providing with everyone involved. They were provided with escort vehicles, with lights, continuously monitored, food, and pre-arranged all accommodation, which is part of that AIMS process, but their immaculate execution of it really put all our workers in the safest of conditions. And that came with condition forecasts and obviously the buddy system. No one goes alone. And this is what it looks like. You get to be in the desert with a fancy high-vis, some fancy cars, just kind of aimlessly around. And I get the privilege of teasing my co-workers for the entirety of this meeting. So finding the lost source. So we did have that modified Coris. It could cruise down the road at 70 kilometres an hour, though we did test it. It could go a bit faster, but there was no need for safety. And it did, in search mode, ping, as you can see here, a spike that had been calibrated to the cesium source we'd lost. At that point, the rest of the instruments we had on site went ballistic in that van. To give credit to the information that we'd been provided, I can say with all the parties involved, there was no doubt if we're going to find it. Everyone had the capability, and we were all competing as who was going to get the lucky location. And it's a testament to the intelligence that the WA police put into this, because we found this in 2 hours of landing in Newman. That's how quickly this was, so a credit to WA police. So with that spike, what happens next? Planning. The best place to be in is once you've found it. We know everyone is safe, we can secure the site. And that included establishing appropriate perimeters, readings, and also calling in additional support. This was legitimately on the side of the road, so we had to make sure those road trains weren't going to take out our DFES, out our workers, and we could have the appropriate resources sent to us so we could safely relocate this. Part of that was determining exactly where it was. So we took an unmodified Coris, and we get that gorgeous little heat map, very accurate, and we are very proud of that picture. We calculate our dose constraints, and from there we plan our recovery method. Now for all here, it's time distance shielding. It's not difficult, but there is a lot of maths that goes into it, and we want to take our time. If anyone's responded to an emergency event, it's hurry up and go slow. Take your time, that once we've secured the area, we are okay, because now we are in control. The big thing I want to emphasize in this is the people. This was 1,400 kilometres away from the original EOC. We had to mount a second EOC to help coordinate this and get them the resources they needed in the middle of the desert with a single satellite phone that liked to cut out. We had to report this back into our EOC, who was telling the government, we have found it. And I can tell you now, that call from sitting in that room was ecstatic. It's a miracle we didn't throw a chair, we were that happy. But then we were left with, oh God, now we've got to get it back. And obviously we needed to really consider, how are we going to do this? Do we pop it on a plane? Do we drive it? What equipment do we need? Making sure we could get it out there. And credit to my co-workers, they practiced. Because once we found it, we could practice and make sure we were going to pick this up the first go, regardless of our expertise, so that would not be an issue. And as a result, you get some very happy people in the middle of the desert, which I can say is quite rare, though Lachlan is looking a bit concerned and sunburnt. So key learnings, people and capability. I cannot stress enough, the reason we could do this is we knew our capabilities and our equipment before we ever got the call. We had been practicing and preparing for this scenario since we sort of developed and had a requirement to have an emergency plan. All the group members part of this are not a core unit to emergency response. They are people that have been identified with key capabilities that would touch on the soil. Would you be willing to help if we were to train you if this scenario ever emerged? So the resources are already there. Know it, work with it, and prepare for it. Use a range of tools. We had the Coris modified so we could do something that they wouldn't expect. And that was something that we're really proud of, because while the technology is fantastic, it's the people behind it that can bespoke it for what we need that really makes this incredible. Additionally, identify your gaps early. We strive for excellence, but honestly, it's not achievable. We're always just going to have to experience it in the moment and then set the bar again. So always look for it and embrace those opportunities. Even from this, we identified what we can do better, and we've begun taking those on board. This includes improving some of our emergency kits, training up more people, because while we had those resources now, we're like, what if that person called in sick? Well, we're like, well, let's get another 5. We want this. And that comes back down to our people. Practice your scenarios. We're proud of our training, and we do offer that to the rest of Australia. So please come aboard. The more familiar we are with a hazard, the better we control it. It is the unknown that's our enemy. And understand and utilize your people's strength. As I said, no one person in that group was from the same group. We reached across our all organisation to get the right core people to respond to this event, and we embraced them. And obviously, define your roles. That is what's going to enable you to interoperate and work with anything across Australia. Now, while we're really proud we found it, I stand by. Any one of those responding agencies could have beat us to it, but Christ, I'm happy it was us. And as a result, I leave you with the goofiest photos, and I'm sorry, ABC did us dirty. Any questions?